Next up, I get to chat with one of my own personal favorite handicappers, a guy that I have much to bond over, including our incredible respect for my friend and mentor, and a friend of mentors his as well, the great Harvey Pack. We now bring in from Daily Racing Form, Dan Illman. Dan, how are things?
Doing great, Pete. Always great to talk to you.
Well, we're here to talk about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile specifically. But before we dive into that race, I want to give you a chance to talk about some of the stuff that Daily Racing Form has coming up. I know there's a lot of great content already coming at drf.com, more coming down the video side of things. What should people be on the lookout for?
Well, that's for the video side of things. The team will be out at Santa Anita. We'll be doing previews, and with all of the talent that DRF has, a slew of handicappers, whether it's Brad Free and David Aragona, Andy Beyer will be doing a webinar, myself, Mike Beer, Steve Anderson, Marcus Hirsch. Everybody is on board, of course, for the Breeders' Cup. We'll have some great video handicapping previews. And, of course, on drf.com, we'll be covering the races, race advances, race recaps, all the latest news and notes.
Very, very cool. And you're doing the BC Advance again this year as well?
I'm pretty sure we're doing the BC Advance, at least online. I've got to think we're doing it probably in print.
Excellent, excellent. A lot of great information in there, and it's all going to be coming fast and furious. These pre-entries are going to arrive. We're going to have past performances, and then boom, for the serious horse players, there's not much else cooking besides that for the next 10 days, as well as the daily action, of course. But, you know, in terms of the big picture of life, Breeders' Cup definitely taking center stage. I threw it open to you which race you wanted to talk about today. And without hesitation, you picked the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. What, for you, makes this such an interesting contest?
Well, it's a great regional matchup, isn't it? We've got two nice ones from the East Coast and two nice ones from the West. From the East, we've got Locked and we've got Timberlake, and I think they're both very good. And on the West, well, it's Bob Baffert's world out there. We've got the $2 million trainee Muth, and we've got Prince of Monaco's kind of unexposed, isn't he? He's undefeated, but he missed his last prep. Baffert gave him a lot of time since he won the Del Mar Futurity, and he's kind of the other Baffert. And how many times have we seen that in major races in Southern California? They look like the main protagonists in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but a pretty nice supporting cast as well.
Yeah, when I was looking at this race, I just kept coming back to this big four, and I had the theory that because of divided loyalties of race goers, handicappers between those four, you might see a decent priced favorite in this race. I mean, do you really see this as pretty much of a four-way vibe between those two, or do you ultimately lean one way or another when assessing?
I'm going to lean towards the East Coast horses, and it's not the East Coast bias that a lot of fans like to complain that us handicappers have that are based here on the East Coast. I just like what I've seen from both Locked and Timberlake, and I guess of the two, Timberlake might offer a slightly more value because handicappers might downgrade his win in the Champagne, A, over a sloppy track, B, around a one-turn mile. Now he's going to have to stretch out 2 turns over a fast track, but I'm really not worried about distance. I think his dam was a true stayer overseas, one of something like 14 furlongs, and this horse has run well on fast dirt in the past. My concern with Timberlake is that he's not really the kind of horse that breaks great out of the gate. He's kind of got to get himself into position, but I just think he's learning. And as for Locked, his 2 races were very, very impressive. From Saratoga, the maiden win going the mile out of the chute was just a blowout performance. And last time out in the Breeders' Futurity, wide trip, what impressed me the most, Pete, was that his first thrust was parried by that little street fighter, the wine steward, the New York bred. And he had every reason to just run second after that, but he just refused to lose. I have a feeling he's a pretty special horse that's going to want to go long as well.
I'm easily sold on him. I just think that the toughness is there, the improvement is there. My question for you about Timberlake, I guess I am holding. I'm not necessarily willing to take the Champagne literally because of the surface. And I keep looking back to that hopeful. And, I know he had the horrible, horrible trip, but it was just so slow that I'm finding myself having a little bit of trouble fully embracing Timberlake. Talk me out of it.
I think a lot of folks are having trouble with the hopeful. You look at that race, and no knock against Nutella Fella, who's unfortunately been battling some foot issues. Looks like he won't make the Breeders' Cup. That horse ran very well in the hopeful, but you're right. The Beyer speed figure came back dreadfully slow, and there were just some notable no-shows in that race. But the way I'm looking at it is I'm just going to draw a line through it. I just have a feeling that was one of those weird races where things happened, a long shot won. I'm just not that interested in the race. Plus, Timberlake was wearing blinkers that day. They took the blinkers off for the Champagne. He seemed a lot more comfortable in the early portion. Maybe it was the wet track. I'd like to think that without the blinkers, maybe he relaxed a little bit more going the extra distance. So for me, the hopeful is just kind of a throw-out race. I think there were a couple of no-shows. Some of those horses have come back and have run just fine. So I'm not really that worried.
I think you make a compelling case not to get too worried about that when we have an important bit of form since it feels like you've already, am I right that you're a little bit maybe leaning towards Muth as opposed to Prince of Monaco in terms of the Southern California form, or are you still sort of trying to separate those two?
I'm kind of up in the air. Muth did win around 2 turns last time out. I know he beat sort of the other Baffert in this race, but that race just did not look very strong on paper. I did like the way Muth showed the ability to rate, which was a bit concerning going 2 turns. Maybe he was going to be a speedball. That was not the case. I wonder if that was kind of his Breeders' Cup, though. I'm just going back to the undefeated Baffert horse, Prince of Monaco, and I'm thinking to myself, his race was very workmanlike, wasn't it, in the Del Mar Futurity? It was a race where he was something like 1-20. He didn't win like a 1-20 shot. The horse he beat is, of course, another Baffert horse, Miramati, who is still a maiden and hasn't been seen since. But I just like the fact. I think a lot of folks don't like the fact that Baffert skipped the American Pharaoh with this horse. I like it. I think he wanted to give this horse another month to mature, and perhaps he is more physically mature now and is ready for a breakout performance. It's probably going to all come down to price for me between those two, and it might be a toss-up even there.
Outside of this quartet that you and I are both focusing on, is there one or two in particular you think are worth putting forward, maybe to either separate those or even pull the upset in the juvenile?
We have to talk about the Japanese raider, don't we, Pete? Koro Neo, who is still a maiden after 2 lifetime starts, simply because the Japanese have had such great success on the international stage in recent years. And this is a kind of odd pedigree. It's turfy on the bottom, but he's by Bernardini, one of those just notorious stallions whose progeny just don't seem to handle turf at all. And this horse debuted on turf and did nothing. And I watched his last race. They cut him all the way back to 6 furlongs at Hanshin, and he closed like man of war in the stretch. He must have made up something like 15 lengths. It was a remarkable run from a horse that was just completely out sprinted. I have no idea what he was in against that day, but he at least showed he could handle dirt, and he was flying at the end. The concern is that running style really going to work at Santa Anita, especially if he's run off his feet early? But simply because he's here, he showed some life. We've seen the Japanese horses run well, and he's bred for 2 turns, makes him somewhat interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming you're still going to be dealing with just an absolutely massive price, despite all the success that the Japanese have had on the world stage. One other that I wanted to ask you about in particular, a horse that Jonathan, when we talked about this race, was interested in almost as much as the top 4. To him, it's not a 4, it's a 5 at the top, with General Partner being the other horse. I think it's a little bit interesting at a price, but I was just curious to get somebody else's perspective on General Partner and how serious of a contender he might be for this.
Well, he's a serious contender if you believe he can get loose on the lead. And I think that's a chance in there, because I'm not sure they really want to go all out with Muth early, especially after he showed that he could rate. And Prince of Monaco seems like a very rateable type as well. Locked, we know, is sort of a mid-pack runner. And I think, as I mentioned, Timberlake, not great from the gate. He's more of a stalker. There is a good chance that this horse can get to the lead. I really liked what I saw when he graduated, going 7 furlongs at Saratoga. And last time out, I don't mind Manny Franco, what he tried to do there. He tried to slip away through a very quick third quarter on the lead. He opened it up, and he just got run down by Timberlake. Perhaps he's simply better over fast going. I'm a little bit curious, as a Speightstown out of a distorted humor mare, how far he wants to go against grade 1 competition at this point, but nothing wrong with betting a speed horse at a price. He could be the 5th choice in here.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. Any other thoughts? Anybody else you want to pull in here for a quick mention before I let you get back to your workday, Dan? Again, really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come join us here.
What do you do with Fierceness, Pete? I'm more interested in your opinion on this horse, because he was so impressive, breaking his maiden first time out for Todd Pletcher over a wet track. And then he shows up in the Champagne. He's odds on over a wet track. He doesn't break well. He's wide. Maybe it wasn't the ideal trip. He didn't pick his feet up. He was bad. I think the fact that Todd's here is a pretty good sign.
It's interesting. I did think that there might have been some flow aided stuff in the big number two back. That race was really run to suit. He might have been on the right part of a racetrack too. So I just can't support coming off something so bad. Now, having said that, this is the kind of horse who, especially as a price, if we get to clap eyes on during the week and is clearly training way better, I'm not going to be stubborn about this. But from where I sit now, I think in a deep and competitive running of this race, I have to be leaving that one on the outside looking in.
I think it's probably a good point. It'll leave it down to price. I mean, if he is dismissed at something like 15 or 20 to 1, considering that he has shown some speed, he at least could prove a nuisance to general partner early and maybe set things up for other horses. But, kind of in Todd I Trust has always been a good angle over the years. This horse has shown some ability. He's still a little bit unexposed. I mean, we are on the happy hour, and we have to talk about the Wine Steward and Wine Me Up, don't we? I mean, the Wine Steward, I really love it. He's a gritty little guy, isn't he? I mean, while Locke, he had such a much of a better trip than Locke did last time out in the Breeders' Futurity. He tracked the pace from the pocket after breaking from the rail, but boy, he gave it his all. He was belly low the last 16th of a mile, and Locke just beat him. And while I really like this horse as a horse, I have a feeling that's the very best he can do, and he might have to do better.
I think that's a fair assessment, but I mean, it's absolutely the kind of horse that will have some big prizes, I think, by his name at some stage, whether it's in the New York bred ranks or here. And yes, so that would have been an epic host fail if I didn't get the mention of the alcohol horse or alcohol horses in the juvenile here on Horse Player Happy Hour. And also, we're going to use this for double duty on our Monster Pod as well. It's great to have you here, Dan. Look forward to seeing you out in Santa Anita, and Godspeed, my friend.
Hey, it's always great talking to you, and good luck to everybody in the BC.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want more great content, choose one of the videos you see on screen now, or go to our website, inthemoneypodcast.com. And for even more, check out inthemoneypodcast.com/plus.